I remember that day so vividly it still feels like the air hasn't moved since. The laughter of guests, the clinking of glasses, the soft hum of music that floated between conversations. It was supposed to be the day my heart finally rested. My wedding day. The moment I had pictured as the ending of all the lonely chapters before it, the beginning of something safe, something beautiful, and for a few fragile hours I believed it was, until she smiled. Until she said those words that sliced through the joy like a hidden blade. My mom, my own mother, with that polite, practiced smile she wears when she wants to humiliate me without raising her voice. Your sister deserves the car his parents gave you, not you. I can still hear the tremor in her voice disguised as calmness, the way her eyes darted just slightly toward my sister before meeting mine. She said it like it was a fact, not an insult, like it was some universal truth she was tasked to deliver. And everyone around us heard it. The air turned heavy, people shifted, and I felt myself shrinking. Just like I used to when I was a child, trying to make myself invisible so her words wouldn't find me. But they always did, they always do. That moment wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the gift or the wealth or the display of generosity from his family. It was about something deeper, something that had been building for years. The belief my mother held that love, kindness, and even good fortune were things I never truly deserved. She said it with the same ease she used when she'd tell me growing up. Don't act like you're better than your sister. Even when I hadn't said a word. It was her way of putting me back in my place. Her favorite place for me, beneath my sister. And that day in the middle of my wedding, in front of people who didn't know our history, she did it again. She dressed cruelty in a smile and handed it to me like a wedding gift. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was full of invisible screams. I just smiled back, the way I'd learned to do to survive her kind of love. The kind that feels more like judgment, the kind that demands silence in exchange for temporary peace. I walked away, still smiling, because that's what daughters like me do. We walk away so no one sees the crack forming. We swallow the ache so the day isn't ruined. We keep the peace even when it kills something inside us. Later that night, when everyone had gone and the lights dimmed, I stood in front of the mirror still wearing my wedding dress. The makeup was fading, the curls were limp, but the words echoed so sharply it felt like they were carved into my reflection. Not you. That's what stayed with me. Not the laughter, not the vows, not the music, just that reminder, that in her eyes, I was still the girl who never deserved anything good. It's strange how a lifetime of small wounds prepares you for one big one. How the years of subtle dismissals of being compared and diminished build an armor you don't even know you're wearing. Growing up, my sister was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The one who was adored, celebrated, defended. I was the shadow, the filler, the one who existed to make her shine brighter. And my mother made sure I knew it. When my sister got an award, it was because she was brilliant. When I did, it was because the teacher felt sorry for me. When she failed, it was bad luck. When I failed, it was proof that I wasn't trying hard enough. That I wasn't enough. That car wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol. To my mother, it represented something she couldn't stand to see me have: validation, acceptance. A gesture that said, "You are worthy." It didn't matter who gave it. What mattered was that it was given to me. Because in her world, love and goodness were things my sister deserved, and I was only meant to watch from the sidelines. I wish I could say I confronted her that night, that I told her how deeply she had hurt me. But I didn't. I stayed quiet as I always had. I told myself it wasn't worth it, that it was better to let it go, to keep the peace, to start my marriage without bitterness. But silence doesn't heal wounds, it only hides them. And when you hide pain long enough, it grows roots. It wasn't until weeks later, when I came home from a family gathering and sat in the car alone, that it hit me. I had spent my entire life trying to earn something from her that was never mine to have. Her approval, her pride, her love. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, smiled wider, stayed quiet, didn't cause waves, she'd finally look at me and see me as enough. But that day at my wedding was the final proof. There was nothing I could ever do to become deserving in her eyes. It's hard to accept that your own mother envies you. It feels unnatural, like the ground shifting beneath your feet. But when I looked back, I realized that every time something good happened to me, she found a way to taint it. Every joy was met with a reminder that someone else, usually my sister, deserved it more. When I got my first job, she said, "Your sister should have gotten that opportunity." When I bought my first car, she told me I was flaunting. When I got engaged, she said, "Don't expect us to spend much. We already did enough for your sister." And I accepted it, because part of me believed she was right. That's the kind of power emotional manipulation holds. It teaches you to question your own worth until you start policing your own happiness. You begin to dim your light before anyone else has to. You shrink your wins, you downplay your blessings, you apologize for being happy. And I had done that for years. I had apologized for my existence in the name of family peace. But something shifted after that day. Her words didn't just hurt, they awakened something. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was clarity, but for the first time, I saw her not as the woman who gave me life, but as the woman who couldn't love me without conditions. I realized that the bond I had been protecting all my life wasn't built on love, it was built on fear. Fear of losing her, fear of being the bad daughter, fear of being alone, but you can't build peace on fear, you can only build silence, and silence I learned is not peace, it's prison. I started pulling away quietly, I stopped calling first, I stopped explaining myself, I stopped defending my choices, my life, my joy. I learned that I didn't need her approval to breathe. That love doesn't have to come from the people who raised you. It can be found in those who see you, who respect you, who celebrate your growth without envy. I started learning what it means to mother myself. There's something both tragic and liberating about realizing that your family might never change. The tragedy is obvious. You mourn the love you'll never have. But the liberation comes when you stop waiting for it. When you stop living your life as a plea for their affection. I used to think healing would come when she apologized, when she finally admitted she had been unfair. But healing came when I stopped needing her to. I stopped replaying that wedding moment in my head. I stopped wondering what I could have said differently. Because the truth is, there's nothing I could have said that would have changed her heart. You can't convince someone to see your worth if they are invested in denying it. Some people need you to stay small so they can feel significant. Some people love you better broken. For a long time, I blamed myself for the distance between us. I told myself I was being dramatic, ungrateful, too sensitive. But now I see that choosing peace isn't cruelty, it's clarity. I still love her, but I love her from a distance that protects my peace. Because I've learned that love without respect is just control. And I've spent too many years mistaking control for care. Sometimes, when I pass by that car, the same one that started this storm, I smile, not because of what it represents in her eyes, but because of what it represents in mine now. Freedom, independence. Proof that I can receive without guilt. That I can own something beautiful without apology. It's no longer a symbol of what she tried to take away, it's a reminder of what she couldn't. There's a unique kind of grief that comes with being the child who was never chosen. You learn to nurture yourself in ways you were never taught. You learn to celebrate yourself quietly because you know no one else will. You learn to build confidence from the ground up, brick by shaky brick. And eventually, you learn that being unchosen doesn't mean being unworthy. It just means your light was never meant to shine in that house. It was meant to light your own. I still think of her sometimes, the way she smiled that day, how it wasn't a smile of joy for me, but of satisfaction in reminding me where she thought I belonged. But now I smile too, because I finally understand something she never did. My worth was never hers to give or take. Her approval is not the currency of my happiness. I no longer live to earn her love. I live to honor my own. I stopped inviting her into moments where her words could wound. I stopped telling her about things that bring me joy. I built walls not out of bitterness, but out of survival. And behind those walls, I started growing. Slowly, quietly, steadily. I started building a life that wasn't about proving anything to anyone. Healing didn't come easy, it came in pieces. In lonely nights when I missed the idea of her more than the reality. In therapy sessions where I unpacked years of gaslighting and guilt. In small victories, like saying, no, without explaining, or celebrating my wins without feeling like I needed to hide. Healing came the day I looked in the mirror and said, you did not deserve to be treated that way. And believed it. I don't hate her. I've stopped trying to. Hate is just another kind of tether, and I'm tired of being tied to pain. I've learned to release her. Not to forgive what she did, but to free myself from the weight of it. I can love her and still choose myself. I can remember her smile that day and still smile back, knowing I survived what it took to stand there. Because that's what healing really is, not the absence of pain, but the presence of peace. The understanding that you can't rewrite the past, but you can choose what you carry from it. I carry the lesson, not the wound. I carry the understanding that family isn't always love, and love isn't always kind. I carry the truth that my worth doesn't need validation from those who refuse to see it. When I think back to my wedding now, I no longer think of that moment as the one that ruined it. I think of it as the one that revealed everything. It showed me who she was, and it showed me who I no longer needed to be. Her words may have been cruel, but they set me free. Healing began when I stopped seeking love from where it was withheld and started building it where it was born. Inside me. Healing began when I stopped performing for her applause and started living for my peace. It sounds simple when I say it now, but it took years of unlearning to get here. For as long as I can remember, I lived like I was on a stage I never auditioned for. My every move, word, and choice was carefully crafted to please her, to avoid her disapproval, to keep her from turning that cold, sharp tone toward me. It didn't matter what I wanted, only what would make her proud. Or at least, what wouldn't make her disappointed. I chased her approval like it was oxygen, thinking if I could just get it once, if she could just look at me and say she was proud, I'd finally be enough. But it never came. Because the applause I was performing for was never meant for me. It was meant to keep me small. When you grow up around someone who measures your worth by how well you make them look, you start confusing love with validation. You learn to smile even when you're breaking, to please even when you're exhausted, to agree even when every part of you is screaming to say no. My mother had a way of making everything about her, my success, my pain, my choices. If I did something good, she'd twist it until it was her victory. If I failed, it was my flaw. And the worst part was, I didn't even see it as cruelty. I thought that was love. I thought that's what daughters do. Every holiday, every family dinner, every phone call. I rehearsed my lines in my head, anticipating what would make her happy. I would lower my voice, soften my opinions, and laugh when she made jokes at my expense. I would let her rewrite my memories, downplay my accomplishments, and make me feel guilty for any joy she didn't create. I became so used to performing that I didn't know who I was when she wasn't watching. I became a version of myself that was digestible, predictable, and safe for her ego, a watered-down version of a woman who was supposed to live freely. The performance didn't stop when I grew up. It followed me into adulthood, into my relationships, into the way I carried myself. I became the peacekeeper, the people pleaser, the one who never wanted to be too much. I apologized for existing in spaces that were rightfully mine. I questioned my own feelings, thinking maybe I was overreacting whenever her words stung. I convinced myself that maybe if I was just more understanding, more patient, more obedient, she would finally see me as worthy. But mothers who feed on control never clap for your freedom. They only cheer when you stay beneath them. The moment that woke me up wasn't loud. It wasn't even dramatic. It was quiet, like the moment after thunder when you realize the storm has passed. I remember sitting alone after another argument, one where she made me feel small for celebrating something I had worked hard for. I had gotten a promotion, something that took years of effort, and instead of being happy, she asked why my sister hadn't been considered too. She didn't even say congratulations. She just redirected the spotlight, like she always did. And for the first time, instead of shrinking, I sat there and thought, what if I stopped trying to earn her happiness? What if I stopped performing for her altogether? It was a terrifying thought, because my entire sense of identity had been built around her reactions. If I wasn't the daughter she wanted me to be, then who was I? If I stopped seeking her applause, would there be silence, or peace? The truth is I didn't know. But I was too tired to keep dancing for someone who never even looked at me with joy. The first time I said no to her, my voice trembled. It wasn't a big thing. I simply said I couldn't come to a family event because I needed rest. Her response was predictable, full of guilt and subtle accusation. You've changed. You think you're too good for us now, she said. The old me would have folded immediately, apologized, rearranged everything just to prove my loyalty, but that day I didn't. I sat in the discomfort of her disappointment and realized that her silence afterward didn't kill me. The world didn't end. I was still breathing. That moment was small, but it was the beginning of everything. I started to notice how many times I had shaped my life around avoiding her reactions. How many dreams I had dimmed because I feared she would belittle them. How many times I had hidden good news because I knew she would find a way to make it about herself. It was like waking up from a long sleep. I started asking myself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid of her judgment? And slowly I began to rebuild a life that belonged to me. It wasn't easy. When you've been conditioned to seek validation, peace feels foreign at first. It's quiet, too quiet. The silence feels like guilt, like maybe you're doing something wrong. There were days I missed the noise. The calls, the criticisms, the constant reminders of her presence. But I realized that I wasn't missing her. I was missing the familiarity of being controlled. Chaos had been my comfort for so long that peace felt like loneliness. But peace isn't loneliness. It's freedom disguised as stillness. There were moments of relapse. Times when I picked up the phone again, hoping maybe this time she'd be different. Times when I'd catch myself editing my words just to avoid her disappointment. But each time I noticed it quicker. Each time I stopped myself from apologizing for existing. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in 1,000 small choices to stop performing. I began to celebrate myself quietly. I took myself out for coffee after achievements. I journaled about my progress. I allowed myself to feel proud without needing her confirmation. I learned that validation is sweetest when it comes from within. I started surrounding myself with people who clapped for me without competition, people who didn't feel threatened by my joy. It's strange how once you stop begging for crumbs, you start recognizing who was starving you all along. My relationship with my mother didn't improve, it transformed. I stopped expecting her to change. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. Instead, I built boundaries, not to punish her, but to protect me. I stopped sharing the intimate parts of my life with her, Stopped inviting her into spaces that made me feel small. I no longer explained my choices or defended my peace. And slowly the guilt that used to eat at me began to fade. Because boundaries aren't disrespect, they're self-respect in practice. Sometimes I still hear her voice in my head, that critical tone asking, "Who do you think you are?" And now I answer softly, "Someone who doesn't need your permission to exist." I remind myself that peace isn't about proving who's right. It's about choosing not to bleed for the same wound twice. I've learned that it's okay if she never understands me. It's okay if she never claps. Her applause is no longer the measure of my worth. There's a kind of power in no longer performing. It's quiet, grounded, and deeply personal. It's walking into a room without shrinking. It's sharing your joy without scanning faces for approval. It's knowing that love doesn't need to be earned. It just needs to be honored. I started living like that, day by day, and suddenly the world became softer. I noticed how much lighter I felt when I wasn't trying to manage her moods. How much more creative I became when I wasn't censoring myself. How much happier I was when I didn't owe anyone my peace. For years, I thought the only way to feel loved was to earn it. Now I know that love that must be earned is not love, it's debt, and I'm done being in emotional debt to someone who keeps raising the price. I no longer need to prove that I'm good, kind, loyal, or successful. I know I am. I no longer need to convince her that I deserve happiness. I do. I don't need her to see me to know I exist. I exist loudly now, freely, even when she chooses not to look. There are still times when I grieve the mother I wish I had. The one who would have been proud, who would have said, "I'm happy for you," without bitterness. But I've learned to mother myself in ways she couldn't. I've learned to clap for my own milestones, to comfort my own sadness, to protect my own peace. The love I was always chasing I found in the way I treat myself now, with gentleness, patience, and truth. Living for peace doesn't mean cutting everyone out or pretending the past didn't happen. It means choosing yourself even when it disappoints others. It means walking away from chaos, not because you don't care, but because you do, about yourself. It means realizing that sometimes love has to shrink so healing can grow. It's knowing that you can love someone deeply and still not let them destroy you. I no longer walk into family gatherings hoping she'll finally say the right thing. I walk in knowing that her words no longer hold power over me. I no longer replay moments in my head wondering if I could have said something better. I know now that her reactions were never my responsibility. I've made peace with the fact that she may never understand the woman I've become. But understanding isn't required for love, respect is. And I can give myself both. I used to think that letting go of her approval meant losing her love. But what I really lost was the illusion of control she had over my happiness. What I gained was everything else: clarity, freedom, and the ability to breathe without permission. I started filling my life with things that made me feel alive, things that didn't need an audience. I read books that healed me, spent quiet mornings with my thoughts, built dreams that didn't require validation. I learned to sit with myself in silence and not crave noise to feel worthy. Healing began when I stopped performing for her applause and started living for my peace. When I realized that the loudest applause I'll ever need is the sound of my own heart beating steadily, no longer racing from fear of disapproval. When I understood that peace isn't earned, it's chosen. Over and over again, every day you decide that your joy is yours to protect. When I finally stopped asking for a standing ovation from someone who never even showed up to the performance of my becoming, and instead learned to bow for myself,